when the truth flies. Maria, 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 say it loud, no veil, no shadow, no hiding shroud. Maria, Maria.
Here's the raw, unfiltered history of what the Spanish did to Boracay, Puerto Rico, and its Taino people. No sugarcoating, no excuses, just the facts. Before the invaders showed up, Boracay was home to thriving Taino communities. They lived in organized societies led by caciques, chiefs, grew crops like cassava and maize, fished, traded across islands, spoke their own language, and followed deep spiritual traditions. They had no defenses against European weapons, horses, or the diseases they carried. When Columbus hit the shores in 1493, the Taino greeted them peacefully at first. That goodwill got repaid with exploitation and horror. The encomienda nightmare. Straight-up slavery Spain slapped the encomienda system on the Taino almost immediately. It forced them to mine gold, farm, and build forts for Spanish overlords, stripping their land freedom and dignity. Conditions were lethal: exhaustion, starvation, beatings, executions. Resistance meant getting hunted down or worse. This wasn't labor, it was enslavement dressed up as legal. Mass death. A genocidal collapse within decades, the Taino population cratered. Historians peg the drop at 80 to 90% in the first 30 to 50 years after contact. Causes stacked up brutally: forced labor, outright murder, starvation, overwork, and waves of European diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza that ripped through people with zero immunity. Many call this a genocidal event, the near-total destruction of a people through colonial violence and disease. By the mid-1500s, distinct Taino communities were shattered. The 1511 rebellion. Taino fought back hard. The Taino didn't just roll over. In 1511, after endless abuse, they united under cacique Aguibanaroman II and launched a full island-wide uprising against the Spanish. It was the first major armed conflict in Puerto Rico between natives and colonizers. The Spanish, with superior guns, horses, and military force, crushed it. Aguibanaroman II was killed, survivors were enslaved or executed, and repression ramped up even harder: cultural wipeout. Erasing identity, Spain went after the soul too. They forced mass conversion to Christianity, banned Taino religion, language, and ceremonies. Kids were ripped into Spanish ways. Traditions punished or erased. This is textbook cultural genocide, destroying a people's core even as bodies died off. Land grab and exploitation. Boracay became Spain's resource pit. Land stolen, trade monopolized, gold and later sugar forced out to fatten the empire. When Taino numbers collapsed, Spain imported African slaves to keep the machine running. More violence, more chains. Sexual violence and forced mixing. Colonization included rampant sexual assault on Taino women, coerced unions, and the blending of Spanish, African, enslaved people brought by colonizers and surviving Taino lines. This sped up the breakdown of separate Taino groups under colonial rule. Extinction myth vs. reality. By the late 1500s, Spaniards declared the Taino extinct on paper, a classic move to erase claims to land and rights. But many survived through mixed ancestry, hidden communities, and resilience. DNA today shows most Puerto Ricans carry Taino genetic markers. Revival efforts keep the spirit alive, but the original society was demolished. Why they did it: greed for gold and land, empire building, forced Christian conversion, and straight-up belief in racial superiority. The Taino were seen as disposable labor and convertible souls. Lasting scars on Puerto Rico, this set the stage for everything that followed. Near-total indigenous demographic wipeout, African slavery to fill the gaps, a triracial mix, Taino, African, Spanish, forming modern Puerto Rican identity. Colonial chains didn't break. Spain held on until 1898, then the U.S. took over. Puerto Rico's story is one long colonial grind. Bottom line: Spanish colonization brought enslavement, mass murder, disease devastation, cultural destruction, land theft, violent crackdowns on resistance, and the near eradication of the Taino within a few generations. Their society was systematically dismantled. Face it, own it, learn from it. Second colonization, the U.S. Era of abuse in Puerto Rico, straight facts, no filter. This is the ugly truth about what happened after Spain handed Puerto Rico over to the United States in 1898. It wasn't liberation, it was a handover to a new colonial power. Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory with no say in the deal, no vote on its future, and residents stuck with second-class status ever since. Many call it the second colonization because the control, exploitation, and disregard for Puerto Rican lives never stopped. They just switched flags. The 1898 takeover after the Spanish-American War, Spain ceded Puerto Rico to the U.S. as war booty. No referendum, no consent. From day one, U.S. territory status, not statehood, limited civil rights, full U.S. control over land, economy, defense, and foreign affairs. Same old story, different boss. Viks turned into a bombing playground starting in the 1940s during WW II. The U.S. Navy grabbed 2/3 of Viks Island. Families forcibly removed from homes, farms, and fishing grounds, expropriated land, pushed into cramped, poor central areas for over 60 years, until 2003. Live bombing runs with real explosives, naval shelling, napalm tests. Depleted uranium munitions, constant explosions, shaking homes and poisoning the environment results. Sky-high cancer rates, respiratory diseases, birth defects, contaminated soil/water, dead fish washing up. The Navy treated Viks like a giant weapons lab while people lived right next door. In 1999, a misfired bomb killed civilian David Saines, sparked massive protests, civil disobedience, international outrage, and celebrity-backed pressure. The Navy finally pulled out in 2003. Cleanup drags on, contamination lingers, and trust remains shattered. Mass sterilization. La Operación. From the 1930s to the 1970s, Puerto Rico saw one of the world's highest sterilization rates. By the late 1960s, roughly 1 in 3 women of childbearing age had been sterilized, pushed by U.S. officials who saw overpopulation as the root of poverty. Women pressured right after giving birth misled about permanence. It's reversible, threatened with job loss or loss of aid consent, often rushed or unclear, tied to eugenics thinking and population control experiments targeting poor Puerto Rican women. Some chose it freely, but the systemic coercion is undeniable, crushing Puerto Rican identity. Gag law Ley de la Mordaza, 1948-1957, made it a crime up to 10 years prison to display the Puerto Rican flag, sing patriotic songs, talk independence, or publish pro-independence material. Pure criminalization of national pride, FBI carpetas, surveillance, thousands of files on independence supporters, teachers, artists, students, everyday people. Infiltration, intimidation, arrests, political dissent was treated like a threat to national security. Medical and social experiments. Puerto Rico became a testing ground. Early birth control pill trials in the 1950s, often on poor women in projects with lax consent standards. Other pharmaceutical and population control studies. Economic fixes, like Operation Bootstrap, shifted from farming to low-wage factories, wrecked local agriculture, boosted U.S. corporate profits, and fueled mass migration to the mainland. The big picture, never truly free under U.S. control. Military occupation of land, bombing civilians, forced sterilization, banned symbols of identity, heavy surveillance, economic dependency, medical experimentation. Today, Puerto Ricans still can't vote for U.S. president, have no voting voice in Congress, live as colonial subjects in a Commonwealth that's really just dressed up territory status. Colonization didn't end in 1898, it evolved. The abuse changed hands, but the pattern stayed the same. Control, exploitation, and denial of full self-determination. This history isn't ancient, it shapes Puerto Rico right now. Face it head on. I love you all, I appreciate every one of you, and I thank you for your time. Stay blessed, feel free to follow for more words of wisdom and prayers. Feel free to subscribe so that you never miss my posts, and feel free to comment. Love always. Santiago, DC. Maria.